This is the GPL podcast from gopherpucklive.com. This podcast is sponsored by Jerry Peters and First Class Mortgage. Our expertise, your peace of mind. Visit us at firstclassmortgage.com. Now, here's Jupe and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the GPL podcast, episode number 223. Well, good evening, Vigo. How are things with you tonight?
Doing well, battling a little bit of a cold, like it sounds like a bunch of the Gophers are right now. I'm just toughing it out, though. Went to the Curd Room, got a good steam treatment before the podcast. So I think anyone who's going through this crud that we have right now, I highly recommend that.
Well, speaking of toughing it out, our guest tonight was thinking he may not make it on time because he had to go have an MRI and, injured himself. So yeah, I could see him in the guest room ready to come in. We might want to bring him in. Jess Myers, welcome back to the show. Jess, I love it when we're ripping on you and you're not even in the show yet.
No, that's fine. I'm guessing you do that most shows that I'm not on anyway, but that's fine.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I got, like I said, on Twitter, I got an upper body injury, but I'm fighting through. It's nothing real exciting and sexy. I have a puppy, and she was trying to run past me on Monday night at a dog park, and I reached out and grabbed her collar, and she just kept running, and that led to me hyperextending my arm and possibly tearing my bicep, which, happens to guys when they're 53 years old. Jeff, the trainer for the Gophers, I was at practice on Tuesday, and I said, "Hey, you mind taking a look at this?" He's like, No, not at all. So he poked and prodded and did all the good things that he does and said, "Yeah, I was hoping to tell you you're just being a wimp, but I'm pretty sure you tore your bicep. You better go get that looked at." So
I was going to give you a hard time because it looked like just a bruise from what I saw. And,
it's
only candy asses can't play through bruises. So
yeah, exactly. long way from your heart, he said.
That sounds painful.
And as one of the few traveling media members with the Gophers, boy, nice timing, right? In front of 6 consecutive road games when I'm going to Detroit tomorrow and hopefully going to Phoenix on Thanksgiving Day and then going to East Lansing. So fun times, but I'm fighting through, and hopefully I get some good news tomorrow when I get the MRI results back. So
I do recommend ice on the plane, Jess, because that thing will swell up
on the plane. Good to know.
Yes, all right. Ice on the plane.
All right.
Well, they let you sneak ice in, Vigs. Maybe it has to be like a cold pack or something like that.
Cold pack. Maybe talk to the trainers. They'll get you one.
I'll bring a cold pack. Well, the team's there already. They're already in Michigan. I'm flying on my own tomorrow, so hopefully the folks at Delta are courteous, kind, and forgiving, and let me bring some ice on.
All right, guys. Well, we had a pretty big weekend last weekend where fairly unheralded Penn State came in, Vigs, and showed they are for real. 4-2 win Friday night, and the Gophers come back Saturday night with 3-1 win, but a solid weekend.
Yeah, I think Bob kind of tried to prepare us for the weekend by saying he thought Penn State was the sneaky team in the Big Ten, and maybe they are the top team, and they have all these goals returning. They've got all this experience, and they play this different style, and they've won all their games. And I think he was kind of expecting his team to struggle a little bit with them. So he was trying to maybe get the minds right for that. And Penn State played probably the best I've seen them play against Minnesota at Mariucci over the last, decade or whatever. And they put a lot of pressure on Minnesota. And I don't think Minnesota really adjusted very well creating offense. Bob said after the weekend, he's like, other than that 1 minute on Friday night, I thought we played okay. I think that's being pretty kind to his team. They went through long stretches where they turned the puck over and they didn't generate scoring chances. So I think it was a real challenge for them all weekend.
And Jess, the Big Ten standings are almost upside down right now compared to what people were picking. You've got Michigan State and Penn State right on the tail, Minnesota right behind, which is obviously good, but what is going on?
Well, Viggs, first of all, following on what you said, Bob changed his tune between Friday and Saturday.
Oh,
Saturday, he said, other than 1 minute, we played pretty well. Friday night after the game, if you'll recall, he said, you can't play 35 to 38 minutes against that team and expect to do well. So, that 22 minutes or whatever that he didn't like shrunk to about 1 minute by the time, and you're feeling good after a win. I get that. But the thing that really struck me about last weekend is going into the weekend, the talk was play our game, get to our game right away. First 10 minutes, play Gopher hockey. Don't let them dictate the pace. They didn't do that. Penn State dictated the pace for the first 20 minutes of Friday night's game. Second period on Friday, Gophers were maybe as dominant as I've seen them all season. They come within a Bryce Brodzinski pipe of taking the lead, and then the dumb fates of hockey, as they would have it in the final 10 seconds of the period. Penn State gets a guy out of the box, he gets a breakaway, he scores, and all of a sudden you're trying to get back to tied again, and it just didn't happen.
And Viggs, one thing you've been harping on this year is consecutive shifts, getting out there, keep playing and having in a row, keep it going. And there was just none of that.
No, and I think when you come into the series and you say you want to play Gopher hockey, I don't know if that's always possible against the way Penn State plays, because they play so aggressively along the wall in the defensive zone. The thing I noticed was they basically choked off the Gophers from escaping up the wall to go that low-high game. They completely choked that off. And the Gophers almost seemed hesitant to cycle back down and make plays down below the goal line or behind the net and go the other way. And I think that was the key to unlocking Penn State's defense, was sticking to that. And that's an adjustment they have to make. And I think one of the reasons Bob shortened his bench on Saturday is because he had a line of players that weren't doing that. They weren't making the plays that were there. They were trying to make the plays they're used to making. And that's the big difference in that series is they got a couple guys like Jackson Nelson who played that low, heavy game that you have to play against Penn State. And I think that's really what got them the win on Saturday.
We've got Ryan K here saying Lacombe played horrible Thursday night, Jess. And Lacombe did have kind of a brutal evening Thursday night.
And that was, that's uncharacteristic because Lacombe has been,
it is. It's been
five, six games into this season. We were talking Hobie Baker, and granted, we're 12 games into the season. It's not like all is lost or anything like that. If you have a rough game, the other thing I'll say, Justin Close was fantastic at points last weekend, and then maybe that third goal in the first game is one that he would like to have back. Just a basic shot from the hash marks, a rising shot that fooled him. You're allowed one of those every now and then, but that did come at an inopportune time because a minute into the third period, you're down 3-1 then. And the thing that really struck me about Penn State is defensively, they block shots, they get sticks in lanes. They're getting really good goaltending from Liam Souliere. And that's an interesting story. I wrote about it this week in my Big Ten notebook. Here's a guy who came in, played 5 games his first year. He played 15 games last year, but didn't ever really become the number one guy in goal for Penn State until later last season. Oscar Audio, who had been their number one guy, actually entered the transfer portal while they were still playing, which I think to me sends a message about, where his head was last year. And that's kind of when Souliere took over the reins. But I was really impressed by Penn State defensively. And for all the talk about the fact that all they do is try and score 7 goals a game and put 50 shots on the net, they're a good defensive team, and they're for real.
And Viggs, we move it to the second game Friday night, and Minnesota turned it around again. And it's one thing we have seen this year is, they might play or even bad one night, but it's never 2 nights in a row on a weekend.
And that's the encouraging thing with a young team is they did respond pretty well. I do think Penn State blocked 10 shots in that first period of the Friday game, and Minnesota was kind of feeding into that. You got to be patient when you have the puck and change the angle. And if the shot's not there, you got to cycle it back down low. And that was a little frustrating thing to see that on Saturday night or Friday night. I think Jess and I were joking, is this a game where you kick the trash can if they keep this up through the second? And luckily they didn't have to. They got some good scoring from that senior line of Nevers, Brodzinski, and Nelson. And I think that line actually did a lot for their style of play that night. I think the younger lines kind of got frustrated with things a little bit and didn't adjust. And so that was the big key. And then back to Lacombe. I don't know if he had a bad game, but he had a couple just critically bad plays. And I think that's the difference. You've got a guy like Jackson Lacombe who hasn't played a lot of defense in his lifetime. And so I think he's still getting these experiences of how to handle those situations. Because how many times do you think he's had a 2-on-1 without back checker support in a big game?
Yep.
Not very often. So it's a
that
big
was
learning
a
experience
weird
for
play.
him.
He just kind of went down to his knees and ended up taking himself out of the play. And I'm like, oh.
And I doubt he'll do that again.
It look even worse, Figs.
Yeah.
I will say I got to credit the conversations we have in the press box. I've got to credit Dylan from Gopher Hole. He had the line of the weekend. Penn State's up by 2 in the third period in that first game, and I jokingly said, "Does Penn State know how to go into a defensive shell?" And Dylan's line was, "Well, then they just shoot from the red line instead of shooting from the blue line." So stick salute to Dylan. Good line. It's funny.
Excuse me. Yeah. Dylan's a good kid. I like Dylan.
Absolutely.
So where does that lead us, Vigs? I mean, we're still looking for consistency over a weekend. We saw it for Notre Dame. Maybe it's still kind of that, slowly going up type of line with little dips going up, but still going up. How do you feel about the whole situation of consistency?
Well, I think in goal, Justin Close played very well over the weekend. I think that's one bit of consistency you can look at. The goals against were those odd man rushes where he's committed to the shooter, and that's on the defenseman to make sure the puck doesn't get across.
Mm-hmm.
He's a goalie who can't really play aggressively and take both the shooter and the second option on the rush. He's got to commit and he's got to rely on his teammates. But again, on Friday night, I thought he played very well. He got a lot of shots, a lot of traffic. He was very calm. He wasn't giving up a lot of loose pucks in front of him. And so I think that was a real consistent thing for the Gophers.
How are you feeling about their consistency, Jess?
It's not there yet, obviously. The night-to-night effort is not there. Now, I'm not as concerned about it just because we saw this last year, I spent all of November last year writing about the fact that they couldn't sweep a series. Bob Motzko corrected me, as he likes to do, and said, "Hey, you haven't written about the fact that we've gotten points every weekend," and that's true. They have. The expectations are sky high for this team, and we just haven't seen again that consistent night in, night out effort. And we talked about it already, but the concern of starting slow in the first game of a series and needing a period or two to kind of figure out the other team. Maybe everybody has to do that, but that's one thing Bob Motzko talked about this week is it's not about counteracting what Michigan does as much or responding to what Michigan does. Is we need to play our game. We need to play Gopher hockey. Similar message to what we got a week ago. So I'll be very interested to see that first period on Thursday in Ann Arbor, what that looks like. And if they can get to their game and get on the board and quiet that crowd and all of that.
Jess, is Pitlick in the doghouse right now?
I don't know that he's in the doghouse. I mean, it would be, he made the dumbest play of the year so far, and hopefully the dumbest play we will see all year. Because if somebody does something more egregious than that, oh boy, and to his credit, youthful, exuberant mistake. He scores in a big game in front of a sold out crowd, and he celebrated in a way that got him in trouble. He won't do it again, I promise you. But I do think, Bob Motzko has made a little bit of mentions here and there of we've got to get Pitlick going. I think the coach sees that they need to light a fire a little bit under him. I hope the mistake he made against North Dakota does not haunt him because he's a great player and a really good kid. And, talking to him for the story I did about Aaron Hughlin a couple weeks ago, just what's it like being on a line with Aaron and what's he like? He's a really good, soft-spoken kid. He doesn't have, I'll go ahead and say it, he doesn't have the arrogance that his brother Rem had when I dealt with Rem. Rem always came across as a very, very self-confident guy, let's say, and I don't see that in Rhett. So I hope he can kind of find his groove here, and we're seeing that from some guys. Hughlin finally got a goal. That was eating at him, albeit in a losing effort, but he finally got to see the red light go on. Bryce Brodzinski now is getting put in those areas where he's just deadly with the puck, and I like to see that. And then you mentioned Jackson Nelson. Man, I have loved what I've seen from him this year. Somebody, I don't know if they needed to remind him, but somebody, got him to figure out that, hey, I'm 6'4" and I can do a lot of stuff.
And it seems like, I think Nelson being matched with Bryce Brodzinski, Vigs, is good, because Bryce needs somebody to kind of set him up.
Bryce definitely needs a space breaker,
because you saw that pass by Cooley, it put him right in a great position. Brodzinski took the shot and scored. His other two goals, on Friday, same type of thing. He was in a good position. He didn't have to get into a good position. He got to a good position, and someone fed him the puck.
Well, I think one of the things about Bryce, when he's playing well, he catches the puck and releases it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to dust it off. He doesn't overstick handle it. He's able to catch a puck, pick a spot, and fire it and deliver it. And so if he's playing with a group of players that also think the same way and can get him the puck in those situations, it's going to make him way more dangerous. And getting back to Pitlick being in the doghouse, I think it's because of the pucks he was throwing away against Penn State. And that's just not how you're going to be successful. If you're blindly throwing pucks up the ice towards your points or to the middle of the ice, and you're not doing it with a purpose, that's going to get you in the doghouse real quick, because this is a team that needs to string those shifts together, and that is the antithesis of that.
Can I answer the question I saw in the chat here?
Go ahead. Which one?
I see Steve Larson asked me at 9:42, what expectations does Jess have for the Gophers this season? I will reiterate what I said at their first practice, about September 15th or so. I did a little video with Pat Micheletti that day, and I said this then, and I'll say it again. On January 1st, I expect that this will be the best team in college hockey. I just think there's that natural break-in period with 10 new faces in the lineup, guys who haven't played college hockey before. As good as they are, it takes a while to get your groove, to get up to speed, to get used to, going into Yost Ice Arena or going on the road or going into a place like Ohio State where there's zero atmosphere and you have to kind of get your blood pumping on your own. They didn't do that, learning how to do those things. I think this is far and away the most talented team that Bob Motzko has had, and maybe the most talented Gopher team in the last decade. Mm-hmm. So I fully expect this team should win the Big Ten title and should be in the Frozen Four.
And there you got Eric Brever. You don't win titles in November or December, but you can lose them. And he's not wrong. But
and you could win the Mariucci Classic in December back in the day. But
yeah, well, what can you do?
So there's my answer. I have faith.
Well, going back to you don't expect the Gophers to come away with a weekend not having points. It's like, Bob, that's the expectation, is that anything less than a split is incredibly disappointing, and anything more than a split is kind of the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I go back to, the theory 30 years ago when I first started covering college hockey was, if you want to win your conference, you sweep your home series and you split your road series. If you do that, you will be one of the 2-3 teams battling for a conference title the last couple of weeks of the season. So I put a big kind of emphasis on your home games that, you got to get 2 wins in those, especially when there are conference points on the line. They haven't done that yet. They didn't do that in November last year. And then they got hot at the right time. And
they did against Notre Dame.
Yep, you're right. They did against Notre
Dame was a very big where that was the weekend really where they put it together, Jess. I mean, they really did.
Absolutely.
So,
which is funny because it came after the weekend against Ohio State where they didn't really have it together. They kind of got away with a split there. They played well, and now they go into the Penn State series and kind of give one away. Maybe going into the Michigan series now, they'll come in motivated on Friday and they won't have to get yelled at Saturday morning.
Well, let's get into that series in just a second here. But first, we need to hear from our sponsor.
Jerry Peters here with First Class Mortgage. Inflation and the tightening economy have taken a significant bite out of our monthly budgets, and many of us have become reliant on credit cards to pay our bills. According to the Federal Reserve of New York, Americans now owe $887 billion on credit cards. That's a 13% increase in just the past 12 months alone. And with interest rates on credit cards in the high teens to over 20%, it's time to look for a better alternative, a cash-out refinance from First Class Mortgage. Fortunately, we have record amounts of equity in our homes. Use that equity to combine high interest rate credit card debt, car loans, and replenish your savings account. Even if it means giving up that super low interest rate you refinanced at a couple years ago. Late payments crush your credit scores, and once you get on that merry-go-round, it's hard to get off. To find out if a cash-out refinance is for you, give me a call at 612-940-3291. You can email me at jerry@firstclasscorp.com or go to mnmortgage.com and fill out a free online application. Mention you heard about me on the GPL podcast and receive a $500 closing cost credit. Some restrictions apply. My NMLS number is 480200. First Class Mortgages is 322842. This is not an agreement to lock into an interest rate under Minnesota law. First Class Mortgage is an equal housing lender.
All right. Of course, we thank Jerry for sponsoring the GPL podcast. I see a question here from Tim. And he wants to know from Bob really has been praising Lamb. Thoughts on his play? We'll hit you up first on that, Jess. Mr. Lamb.
It's a battle for third place among top rookie on this team, clearly, because 92 and 81 have kind of taken that title already, I think, with what they've done. But I really like what Brody Lamb's done for a guy who came in, out of a lesser heralded high school program, played some time in Green Bay. He uses his size well. He seems to fit in really well on that. What are we calling that line? Pitlick, Hughlin, and Lamb. They all have 7 on the, could be the Magnificent 7, could be, Lucky Sevens. I don't know. But
how about everyone name lines or line names or whatever? It's
I'm
gotta
a
have
writer.
a name for everything.
I'm a writer. It's what we do.
True.
Come up with goofy stuff. I mean, come on. So no, I'm all in on Brody Lamb. Great player. Since we're talking about freshmen, the one I will say is I'm not making the line charts out. I don't make these decisions. I don't know how you don't have Charlie Strobel in your lineup every night. He impresses me every time he's on the ice, and he's been in that rotation with with one of the Middlestads, or I know they've sat down Pinanemi one night, they sat down Kurth one night. It's just a numbers game with him, but I really like everything I've seen from Charlie Strobel so far.
Thoughts on Lamb, Viggs?
I think part of the praise for Lamb coming out this weekend was for his defensive play. I thought he was one of those freshmen who did a good job of doing the hard work along the wall, winning the battles to get the puck out of the D zone, and then blocking shots. So I think that's something that Bob is trying to reinforce for all of his forwards, is that's the kind of stuff that's going to get my praise. I felt like Lamb got lost there in the middle stretch of the season, but he's kind of finding his B game again, and which is good defensive presence, smart plays with the puck, and using your body. But he's got great size, and he's been a good addition to the team, even though he is probably the last player to get added to this roster.
All right, big weekend this weekend, Viggs. A Thursday-Friday series again, and everyone's complaining, well, why is this? It's football, folks. There's a thing called the Big House. There's 110,000 people coming in on Saturday.
Although it's going to be cold on Saturday. I don't know if they're going to get that many there.
They probably still will.
We'll see.
Undefeated program.
Tickets are probably sold, Jess.
Yeah.
And they're still going to broadcast the game, and all the Big Ten schools are going to get their $50 million out of the contract.
In color? They'll have it on color TV?
4K probably, Jess. 4K, Jess.
Sure.
But really, Jess, people are complaining, but this is the reality. Football rules. If football's at a normal time, if it's early, maybe 11 o'clock, maybe they do a 7 o'clock hockey game.
Maybe.
But like last weekend, it was there was a 2 p.m. game. There's not going to be hockey on that day. They don't want any other major sports. And now we've got this weekend. It's just the same thing. It just happens to be 2 weekends in a row.
And I'll say this too. When you have conflicts with other sports, move the hockey game. I'm fine with that. And what I'm referencing here is a couple times now, Ohio State has had a noon basketball game and then like an 8 p.m. hockey game in the same venue on the same day. Don't do that. All you're doing is punishing the people who work at your arena. The ice isn't going to be very good. You're not going to be able to have your regular pre-skate routine, all of that stuff. Don't do that. Don't try and be cute and have 2 events in the same venue on the same day.
Or how about women's volleyball and men's basketball right before men's hockey starts?
And swimming.
That was pretty bad.
There's a swimming. I got to the rink at 3:00 that day.
They should have fit in a wrestling match too.
Probably didn't need to get to the rink at 3:00, but what the heck? I was there. Yeah, why not?
Well, like Jeremy Gates says in the chat here, football pays the check. So I mean, they're going to set the rules for it. I saw the Rube is talking about he's fine with the games, but he doesn't like the early times. It's the early times to get them on the network.
I love the early times. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yeah, but if it wasn't on a big, Big Ten network, you're not going to have these early times.
And Jeremy, who says football writes the checks. One of the greatest lines I've ever heard about the impact of college football on any college, but this happened to be at the University of Minnesota. Back when I was working with the state legislature, back in the 2000s, when they were trying to get Huntington Bank Stadium built, they were coming to the legislature asking for money. And Robert Brunix, who was the university president at the time, was talking about, how athletics was in the red, but they needed new sources, blah, blah, blah. His great line was, football is the cause of and the solution to all of our athletic issues.
It's just something we have to live with, Viggs.
Yeah, it's hard to be half in on football and have it be a moneymaker. If you ignore it for many times like Brunix inherited, that's going to be the situation. But, I think the players actually don't mind this playing on the road early. They're going to be home Friday night by 10 o'clock. They'll have Saturday as an off day. It's probably a little nice break for the players when they're on the road. Maybe Yost will be a little bit calmer. I imagine the children at Yost don't have early bedtime, so they'll still be there and be as creative as they are.
5:30 tomorrow night, 5 on Friday. I like that.
I'm a writer on deadline. Play it at 2. I'm fine with that. But I understand, especially for a weeknight game on a Friday night. People need to get off work. They need to get to the arena.
Yeah, that's
give them a break.
And remember, it's a little earlier because obviously they're an hour ahead. So it's a 6:30 start is not egregious by any means.
You won't have early starts the following weekend at Arizona State, so don't.
Well, it's all good. It's all good. All right, Viggs, how about the hockey games actually this weekend? Michigan, they got this guy who's playing really well. Fantilli. This kid is lighting the league up.
Yeah, he's kind of like Matthew Nyes light. He's a little bit slighter than Nyes, but the same kind of player. Heavy, tall, makes skilled plays, very quick. Very good vision, in tight spaces. He's going to be a handful for Minnesota. I think the big issue for Minnesota will be trying to find ways to match him with Brock Faber or Ryan Johnson out on the ice and try to make sure they've got some defensive-minded players out there when he's out there because he'll be physical. I think that's the biggest question with freshmen who come into college hockey is how do they play through contact? We've seen Minnesota's freshmen do a pretty good job of that. Fantilli's doing great. I think he's leading the nation in scoring as a freshman in his draft year, which is pretty amazing.
Initial thoughts, Jess?
Well, I don't like to break news on somebody else's podcast, but in the last couple hours, I've learned Michigan is a mess health-wise right now. I was told they had 10 forwards and 6 defensemen at practice yesterday. No players were made available to the media. Their head coach was not available to the media. So I'm wondering what that line chart's going to look like tomorrow night. And I'm not saying I'm happy about that. I want to see the 2 best rosters that these 2 teams have. Now, before Gopher fans get gleeful about this, Justin Close missed a practice this week. I said to Bob Motzko, your team's been relatively healthy. And he said, clearly you weren't watching practice. Now, I was talking,
that was a good one.
I was talking physical health. I'm talking, sprained ankles and torn biceps and the other crap that people deal with. But illness is making its way through rosters right now. So that to me is going to be the most telling thing I see tomorrow in Michigan is when I first get handed that line chart, what both teams are going to look like.
And now, just because I like to stir the pot, did Connor give you that news about Michigan?
Connor? Who? Jimmy Connors? Who are we talking about?
Who?
I have my own sources. Thank you.
The Mel gave you that. I just like to stir the pot.
That's all right.
Okay. Funny thing is, I was telling Viggs when Jess was two people from me, asked me to be on the podcast. I'm like, can we get Connor Eargood on the same one? He's like, let's go.
So joining us live, no.
That would have been nice, but we're not going to the 4-box.
Somebody's baby daddy's going to show up next. This is fun.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do it for the next episode.
Absolutely.
Michigan comes, when they come here.
Sure, why not?
You and Tex can go at it. That's his nickname, apparently.
Yeah, I think you'll be curious with all the illness going around. We are in kind of a post-COVID era now of college athletics where I think people are still smart about the COVID stuff out there, but I think a lot of this is just normal cold season is in full swing all over the country. I saw something that we're in like a tridemic thing with RSV and flu and all kinds of stuff in the air. And I think that's just what we're going through as society kind of comes back together.
I want to make a comment on one of the comments. I see.
Oh boy, he's reading. I was going to say, were you reading the chat there?
Tim H says Mel, referring to former Michigan coach Mel Pearson, would have canceled the games. I did get somebody contact me tonight saying, I heard that Michigan has a ton of illnesses, a lot of players out of the lineup. What's the odds that they cancel the games? Okay. Let me say this. Mel Pearson's not there anymore, but after last year and that fiasco with them not wanting to play Western Michigan or not playing Western Michigan, can you imagine the chutzpah Michigan would need to go to the Big Ten and say, hey, we have to postpone these games? Mm-hmm. And I certainly hope if them or anyone else asked that, the Big Ten would say, get bent. put a team on the ice. I don't care if it's, somebody off the intramural team.
Well, the key difference here is this is a conference game. So they would have to ask somebody permission before they moved out.
Correct. All right, Jess, let's hear about it. Before we get back to the games.
What are we hearing about?
The Mel.
The Mel.
The hell. The Mel.
I mean, it's Michigan week.
It's Michigan week.
Week.
Obviously, report, it's pretty clear. I didn't read too much into it, but some regions wanted him gone. And they probably let that report get out just to use it as, because they knew it didn't look good. And you were the only person who got to talk to Mel after that. I'll let you just continue from there.
Well, let me say this. Number one, I've known Mel Pearson for more than a decade. It goes back to his first year at Michigan Tech. I was up in Houghton. I went into his office, did an interview with him about one of his players then. Always found him to be a great guy, frankly. Just, somebody you could sit down and talk with. Now, you read the report, you hear stories from people who played for him. It sounds like he had maybe a different persona as a coach behind closed doors. I think most coaches are that way.
Yes.
Most coaches put on a face for the media and put on a different face once the door is shut. Bob Motzko is never going to kick a garbage can in front of us, but he's made it clear that you do that behind closed doors now and then. So with all of that said, I will admit I have a friendship with Mel Pearson and still do. I think he's an outstanding person. I never played for him. I never got benched by him. I never got yelled at by him. Whatever. I have gotten yelled at by other coaches in this league, but that's okay. That's fine. Not everybody's going to like. So with all of that said, when Mel Pearson was on August 2nd or whatever it was, when they made it clear that he would not be coming back, and it was a weird situation, as you remember, because his contract had expired on May 1st.
Yes.
But we spent 3 months with everybody at Michigan saying, oh, no, he's still our coach. It's not going to matter. Then the report came out. Then things got, much more complicated, and they said, we're going to move on. A couple weeks later, my phone rang, and it was Mel Pearson. Now, I had written a column just prior to him being let go saying, for those of us who know Mel Pearson, this is bewildering. It's like this doesn't fit with the person that we've known. But again, we're not behind those closed doors. My phone rings and I see it's Mel Pearson, and my initial thought is, okay, I'm going to let this roll to voicemail, because I'm thinking maybe 2 weeks later he's upset about reading what I wrote, whatever. But I thought, you know what, I'm 53. I've been yelled at by coaches before. If there's music to be faced, I'll face it. We actually had a very nice conversation, and included in that conversation was him saying to me, if I want to tell my story, would you be willing to sit down and listen and tell my story? I said, absolutely. Because no matter what you think of him, no matter what you think of anybody, I think everyone deserves that right to tell their side of the story. So it worked out great. He came to Minnesota to do some scouting for a AAA team that he's coaching with now. We met at a hotel lobby in Edina, which ironically is where he was a high school hockey star back in the 70s. We talked for about an hour. There were some funny moments. There were some tears shed. It was a very frank conversation. No subjects were off the table. I asked some questions that I knew he probably wasn't comfortable answering. He gave me some answers that were frankly uncomfortable. But he was open, and I think for the most part, he was very honest with me. We addressed a lot of the things that were in that report. I managed to sit down and put together, I think it was about a 5,500 word story when all was said and done, and in the journalism world, 1,000 words is a pretty big story. Well, we managed to put together about 5 times that. I got several negative comments. I got 10 times as many positive comments. So, a lot of people didn't like the fact that, a lot of people want Mel Pearson to go away and not be heard from again. Sorry, that's not the way I work. And to those who criticize me in print, I've made this very clear in Twitter. I'll say it again. I stand by what I wrote.
Fair enough, Jess. That's why we have you on, because we know you give us a straight scoop of what happened. So
that's what happened.
Do you think that Mel understands why he's no longer the coach at Michigan?
I do. And I mean, in the conversation I had with him that day, he said, am I a perfect person? No. Could I have done some things differently? No. He showed me documentation from people who had worked for him. And in this documentation that is written on his behalf, there's stuff like, Mel could be better with people, or Mel could do this differently. I mean, I think he acknowledges that in this era of, more sensitivity, let's call it, he wasn't always there. So I think he understands that, but he was, I won't say defensive, but he was very frank about, saying things like, if my program was such a mess, if the atmosphere was so toxic in this era of the transfer portal, why in the last 5 years did one player transfer? Why, when 4 of the top 5 picks in the NHL draft were Michigan guys, and all of them have big money waved in their faces, and all 4 of them say, you know what? No, I want to go back and play one more year for Mel Pearson. Want to try and win a national title. If the atmosphere was that bad and it was that toxic, I don't know that you see that happen. So I do think that there were issues in that program, clearly, and I think everybody on whether you like Mel or dislike Mel has acknowledged there were issues that could have been corrected and hopefully would have been corrected. But I think it had gotten to the point, like you had mentioned, with some of the board of regents, that it was just time to move on.
I think some people who are critical of that article that you wrote and in your interview that you conducted don't understand the realities of big time athletics, whether it's Big Ten athletics, NCHC athletics, Big Ten football, professional sports. There's going to be tough conversations throughout the year about playing time, everyone's experience. This isn't rec league hockey. Mel's getting paid a very handsome salary to coach Michigan hockey. He's going to do what's best for him and what's best for his program. He's not going to massage everything for fourth and fifth line players. And it's going to be difficult for everybody to handle that. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be mental health stuff that comes up. There's going to be scholarship money that gets complicated. And so it's a tough world, I think, for these coaches. And I think what Mel lost sight of maybe was some of the small stuff that's really important.
Yep.
That's not the hockey side. That's the people side. And I think he just lost sight of that. And I think that's common for some of these people in these positions. They don't see that perspective. They're all about the hockey stuff first.
Yep. Well, I'll say this too, as long as we're on this topic. The vitriol directed at Mel Pearson that I've gotten from a handful of Michigan Tech fans. Wow. Now, and the reason I get it, you're mad because he left, okay? And now that it's popular to rip on Mel Pearson, it's easy to jump on that bandwagon. If you're a Michigan Tech fan over the age of 30, did you enjoy the GLI consolation game that much all those years? Because your program was a joke for 30 years. And Mel Pearson had you in the NCAA tournament 3 years later. He literally turned your program around. And yep, he left and went to Michigan like everybody knew he would eventually. But wow, if you're a Michigan Tech fan and you have nothing good to say about Mel Pearson, I do not understand you at all.
Bitterness.
Yeah.
It's just bitterness.
Yeah, I get that. But it's like, come on, guys. I watched a lot of bad hockey coming out of Houghton from the years, 1991 to 2011 inclusive.
Well, yeah, but really since 1977 and on. I mean, late 70s on, it's just been. Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of coaches who want to coach at Minnesota and Michigan because look at the recruiting classes you're able to get when you're a competent coach at these schools. It's pretty turnkey.
Yep.
And for the people, listening to the podcast, Eric Brever had a question. Motzko gets the same vitriol from SCSU, and that's most definitely true. Well,
I will say, not to refute that, but I will say, like last year, for example, when the Gophers played up there and Bob Motzko was introduced, I'd say it was about 50-50. There were boos, definitely, and there were a lot of cheers, too. Now, part of that is Mac Motzko.
Correct.
He was such a huge part of that community. That family was such a huge part of that community. Are you going to lustily boo a guy who just lost his son and, a seat is reserved for his son in the arena and all of that? And, people who knew Mac better than me have told me there was nothing he wanted more in his life than to be a Husky someday. And, so the ties between those programs will always be great. But, yep, there's a certain brand of St. Cloud State fan who is never going to forgive Bob Motzko for having the gall to go on to a higher paying job with some more resources.
At a university that may not be dying as much as St. Cloud is, because beyond hockey, it's really looking bleak up there, Leagues.
I mean, their enrollment's down. They expanded in the wrong areas as an academic institution. They already cut their football program to try to stave things off. It's like when you're on the lifeboat and you're trying to cut some weight, you got to figure out things to toss overboard, and they've got some challenges ahead still.
They definitely do. Okay, let's get back to hockey, guys. Sorry, I had you here, Jess, and I started thinking about it. Let's talk about the Mel because
no, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah,
it's nothing I shy away from.
Obviously, a big weekend. I mentioned Mr. Fantilli. What's going to happen this weekend? Man, I personally, I love the Michigan weekends as much as the North Dakota weekends. I love it. It's just, for some reason, it's always just been huge for me. What are your thoughts?
Me or Eric?
You, Jess.
They're going to split. Is that the cop-out answer? They're going to split. They're going to not get to their game right away on Friday night. Michigan's going to eke out about a 3-1 win with an empty net goal, and Saturday night, the Gophers are going to come out with some renewed vigor and are going to win about 5-1.
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just going on past precedent. That seems to be the way things go or have gone this season so far is and hey, you come out of Yost with a split, God bless you, because it's a tough place to play and that's a really good team. So anything more than 3 points this weekend is going to be real gravy, but that's just kind of what I expect. A lot of these guys have played there. A lot of the young guys are out of the national team development program, so they're familiar with that part of Michigan. I don't know that they necessarily played at Yost, but they know the aura of Michigan and all of that and going into that building. So yeah, that's just my cop-up prediction. They'll split.
Well, Viggs, how about we think about it this day? What does Minnesota need to do to get more than 3 points on the weekend?
I think to get more than 3 points, they need to make Luke Hughes defend. He is their one defenseman that's an offensive playmaker. When he's on the ice, possess the puck, tire him out, make him play defense. When he's off the ice, that's when you want to press. He'll probably play 25, 30 minutes against Minnesota. So in that other 30, 35 minutes, you need to get on your game and get after them. I looked at the odds for the game. Michigan's a slight favorite at home, minus 140. Gophers are a plus 110 underdog. I'm a little surprised it's not a pick'em game because this is a weekend where I think Minnesota should be able to sweep because I think Michigan kind of plays into Minnesota's style. And because of Minnesota's defensive core, I think they're going to be able to control the game a lot better. I think in the Penn State series, there's the shock of that different structure that kind of got Minnesota off their game, and it took them a long time to adjust to it. When they play against Michigan, it's going to be like practicing against themselves. The only thing is the defensemen on the other side of the team aren't nearly as good as yours. So I think Minnesota is going to be able to possess the puck a lot. I think they're going to be able to shut down Michigan in transition, and I think it's a good weekend for the Gophers with the sweep.
I like the Luke Hughes thought. And I go back to Cale Makar's last college game where Minnesota Duluth absolutely shut him down. And you know how you do it when your best players on the other team is a defenseman? You make them play defense because they can't make plays when they're skating backwards.
It's true.
And I think that's a key. And if Minnesota is able to do that, I think it'll be a real growth moment for their team game mindset. That's how you win in college hockey sometimes, is when you get to your ground game and you just link the chains together and you kind of crush a team that way. It's a real powerful thing that the team like the Gophers with as much skill as they have can execute.
Right.
We don't have the Jack LaFontaine revenge factor anymore. I miss that, man. That was always kind of a fun.
Well, yeah, but
fun little thing going in there.
The COVID year, his pure emotional outburst, basically, via Zoom, was one of the highlights of me covering Gopher hockey because we have just really never seen something like that, Jess. Such an outburst that Jack had, and you were there, weren't you? You were kind of way up off.
So yeah, it was the COVID year. The rink's empty. They had us in the suites for some reason. They didn't have us way up in the press box, but we were in the suites, which was fine. And this was so weird about the COVID year. I mean, one of the many weird things is I'm on the road covering the team. And after the game, I can see Bob Motzko sitting 20 feet away, like this on his phone. And I'm talking to him via Zoom when I've traveled to Ann Arbor, Michigan or Madison, Wisconsin, or wherever it happens to be. But yeah, that night, so Bob talked to us, and he actually went and sat in the Children of Yost section amid the cardboard cutouts they had there, which, I don't know if he meant to do that, but it was perfect symbolism that, we just swept Michigan in their own building. I'm going to go sit here where it's nice and quiet among the Children of Yost.
And I don't think we get that moment if he's in a scrum either.
No,
which was...
But then, Jack came on the Zoom and he was sitting in the corner of the arena. There are seats like right along the glass in the corner. He sat in one of those and there's kind of like a desktop there. And he's talking on Zoom to us and got very emotional about, which he thought that was going to be probably his last series in Yost. It turned out he played two more games there the following year. Didn't finish the second game, by the way, because he got pulled because they were getting beat, I think about 5-1, and Justin Close came in and finished that one. But he had just not only swept Michigan, but he gave up one goal that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It was that ridiculous top shelf snipe by Kent Johnson, which, maybe got him to be the 4th overall pick in the NHL draft. That was the only goal he gave up. But you could see it was a very emotional moment for him. And the thing that nobody else saw was he got off the Zoom and absolutely buried his head in his arms and was sobbing. I mean, just and Ben Gordon came out, like, hey, where's Jack? And saw him over there and came over and put his arm around him, and they talked for a few minutes and then made his way back to the locker room. But it was one of those moments that you don't forget, like that you think these guys are all jaded and I'm just here to find a way to the NHL and all that. And this is some meaningful stuff for these guys. This is some key moments in their lives.
Yeah, I posted that video up on our YouTube channel. I have it up there. It's always accessible if people want to see it. If you haven't seen it, go see it.
Yeah.
It's just because it was a raw moment, Jess, and it's just one thing. We like Vig said, we wouldn't have had that in a scrum. It just wouldn't have happened. It was because he was by himself. It really was.
Yep. And he was in an empty building where he had started his college career, and looking around at that place for what he thought was one last time. That was quite a moment. I did write about this week, by the way, his first game back there with the Gophers, and he's a former Michigan player, so he knew he was going to hear it. But his line about the children of Yost, I'll never forget. He said, they had ex-girlfriend info, like a lot of info.
He wouldn't get into it. He was like,
right, no,
can't go there, guys. Family,
but it's years later, so I can say this, So on the record, he talks about how great it was to play there and get a win, and great to be back, and where it all began for him, yada yada. And then the cameras turn off, and he had gotten a win at Yost. The cameras are off, and as he's walking away, he turns around, and he goes, "Karma's a bitch, eh, boys?" So good for him.
Oh, that is good. All right, so Jess, you're picking split. Viggs, you're picking a sweep. I'm thinking I'm going to stick with split myself too. I still think they need to kind of prove it to me a bit more. Jess, what are you working on this week? What's coming out on the Rink Live like tomorrow before the game?
Well, I've got a series preview story up today, which includes some information about the 4 guys that signed national letters of intent for next year. That's some exciting time. And as always, I have the info about where the games are on TV and radio. You can see the post-game video on our YouTube channel on the Rink Live afterwards.
I'm always watching if I'm not there.
Yep, and I will be there. And then kind of looking ahead, and this is kind of an obvious story, but next weekend, they're going to Arizona State. They're going to be there for Thanksgiving. Matthew Nye is going back to his hometown. And I've heard, I'm going to get details from Matthew. We're going to sit down and talk next week, but I've heard that there might be like a big Thanksgiving celebration at the Nye's house with all the team invited, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
And just remember, they have fish in the Nye's family for Thanksgiving, not turkey. Well, so it could be an adjustment for some of them.
I'm thinking if there's 35 guys there or whatever from the team, they're going to need more than one fish.
Get different kinds of fish.
So that's one thing I'm looking ahead for. And just to give a plug, I wrote a story last week. Murray Williamson, Gopher Great from the 50s, has a book out. Murray's almost 90 now. But you talk to him and you wouldn't know that, because just still super sharp mind and quick wit, and a guy who tells just some fantastic stories. He came from Winnipeg. He played for the Gophers, made his home and his life here in the Twin Cities, but he coached the 68 U.S. Olympic team. He coached the 72 U.S. Olympic team. He coached the first ever World Junior team from the United States. He was very involved in American hockey. And the funny story is, so 1960, they win the gold medal in Squaw Valley, and everybody thinks American hockey has arrived, all that. 2 years later, they get beat something like 17-2 by Sweden in an international game.
Ooh.
And the president of the United States at the time, John F. Kennedy, who was an East Coast guy, he knew some hockey, he went to Harvard. Somebody told him 17-2, you lost to Sweden. He said, "Are we sending girls over there? What is going on?"
Oh.
And it was this moment that, hey, American hockey needs to do something different than what it's doing, because this is not sustainable. And that's about the era that Murray Williamson got involved. So anyway, he's got a new book called The Road to Respectability. And it's just some of his best stories about that era in American hockey, which was kind of a defining defining time for the sport in this country. So I want to give Murray a plug. If anybody's looking for a Christmas gift for a hockey fan, The Road to Respectability is his book, and I just enjoyed reading it to no end. Forward by Lou Nanny, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah, and Murray joked that he asked Lou to write the forward, and Lou wrote a forward, and it was all about Lou. So anyway, but Lou tells great stories too. So it's absolutely
obviously he does. All right, Viggs, what have you been working on this week?
I'm working on getting healthy.
I don't blame you.
We'll see. I'm working on getting healthy and keeping my youth hockey teams going.
Here's what the book looks like.
There's the book.
Put that up there. There you go. So it's on Amazon and whatever.
There you go.
Anyway, sorry.
So one thing I'll be watching this weekend, Michigan has probably the top power play in the country. I know they're technically behind UMass for percentage right now, but that's something that Gophers have to watch out for. Their penalty kill is clean against Penn State, but I think it'll be a tougher challenge against Michigan this weekend.
Gotcha. Jess, thanks for coming on with us again.
Always good to talk hockey. Hey, feel better, Viggs. I hope things work out.
It'll be fine. It's not COVID.
You candy ass.
I'll let you know if I have to have surgery. So that'll be fun.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. What do you do?
Oh boy.
As I've said, it's not cancer. I'll be and I'm not joking about cancer, right? But it's.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the GPL podcast. Want to thank Jess again for coming on the show with us once again. We'll be back next week for our Thanksgiving episode where Jack Ramsey's going to join us. So that would be fun. For those of you currently watching live, stay tuned for a bit of overtime. For the rest of you, we'll catch you next week on the GPL podcast. All right, Viggs, beer of the week. What
beer of the week?
Expedition Stout. Is that what it says?
Expedition Stout from Bell's Brewing Company out of Comstock, Michigan. So we drink our enemies here on the GPL podcast. This is a beer from Michigan. This is from the cellar. It's like a 2020, I believe. So it's a little cough medicine for me. It's probably one of the original Imperial Stouts. It's like a 10.5.
That's very
stout. It's delicious. It's a go-to. It's something you could buy a case of, and if you're into stouts, you can let it sit in your cellar, and every year you pull out a 6-pack. That's kind of what I do.
There you
cheers.
Go. Cheers to you, Viggs. Oh. Good show.
Roasty,
Thanks for talking about the Mel stuff. People like.
I'm gonna have a beer too. So it's worth.
Ooh, Dorothy's.
Yeah, I have a daughter who is a freshman at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. So I'm repping Decorah, toppling Goliath, the Dorothy's New World Lager.
I'm gonna go get a refill of water real quick. So fuck amongst yourselves.
Now someday I feel like I have to go to the St. Olaf Luther football game so I can stop at TG Brewing and
on the Blurf they call it.
Yeah,
they have a blue turf field similar to Boise State. They call it the Blurf.
The Blurf.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I saw part of a game there against Buena Vista this year.
Okay, I think their head coach used to be a coordinator at St. Olaf.
Okay,
Joe.
Well, the Norse won 2 games this year, so it was their best season in about 5 years.
They're building. They got a good coach down there now.
They're not a football school. I may have told you this story, but spent literally a week loading a trailer full of all my daughter's stuff to take to her freshman dorm. Showed up there, got the dorm room number. Some guy with a bullhorn says, room B78, whatever it is. The Luther football team came running, and in 90 seconds, they had the trailer unloaded and all the stuff in her room.
Were you able to fit everything in the room? I've seen
Yeah.
that happen sometimes at freshmen. They have too much stuff.
Yep. So yeah, good stuff.
But Luther and St. Olaf, both are known for music, not so much for football, but there's football too. We got the helmets up here, some game balls and things.
I like it. My dad was an Ole for a couple of years. So. Then he transferred to Mankato. Sorry.
It's all right. It's not for everybody.
No.
I like Northfield.
I like how you guys have moved to some YouTube stuff there, Jess.
Yeah, we were using Facebook Live for our video, and Facebook's a good platform, but for whatever reason, it seemed like the audio and the video were always off by about a half second.
Yeah,
they weren't synced exactly right, and we were hoping to switch to YouTube. We had been told that you needed 1,000 subscribers to use YouTube Live. Well, we have like 400 some subscribers. Somebody just tried it and said, "Hey, it works. Let's just do this." So,
and I had the same issue, which is why I went to StreamYard. And when I'm streaming, like after Gopher games, I'm just using StreamYard because this allows me to stream to Facebook Live, to YouTube, and even shows up as a live feed on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, and Facebook is a little tricky too, just because so many people just don't want to go on Facebook. They're very, whatever. And, if you look at this, we are streaming to Facebook right now. And we have a few people. I know our guy, Jared Klein, will be watching on Facebook and he'll comment and you can tell us from there. But most of our people are all watching on YouTube.
The Rube, by the way, commented about Toppling Goliath and then mentioned Pulpit Rock, another very good little brewery in Decorah. So everybody's up for a cool day trip. It's about an hour south of Rochester to Decorah. It's just barely into Iowa. It's like 15 miles. Yeah. Cute little downtown. A lot of good restaurants and a couple of breweries in town, and kind of a fun place.
Didn't your kids stay in Minnesota? Why didn't one go to?
My oldest went to UMD. He followed in his mother and his father's footsteps, and only got to see 2 national championships when he was there.
Oh, jeez, here we go.
It was tough,
Like I said, I liked a lot of Duluth fans until they started winning championships. Then it got difficult to talk to them.
This was a great story, Viggs, about how UMD fans became insufferable after they finally won a title. That's
it was really hard. It used to be really a fun series, and you could joke and have a good time with them, and it'd be very cordial and friendly. And then all of a sudden, they start winning these titles. It's like, man, I can't even talk to you anymore. It's so hard.
I'll say this, having gone to school there in a pretty nondescript era for their hockey program. They were around 500 all 4 years that I was there. The Gopher series was a huge series, obviously, both in Minneapolis, because a lot of folks from Duluth like to make a weekend in the big city. And then to have the Gophers come into your backyard was always a big deal, too. There was definitely a you're the little brother attitude that Gopher fans had at the time. I don't know that they still have that, but in that era where there were still basically only 2 teams in Minnesota, St. Cloud was just starting up. So, the Huskies, I don't even think were in the WCHA at the time. So they were kind of thought of maybe like St. Thomas is thought of now, like, yeah, okay, talk to us down the road. We'll get to you. There was definitely kind of a big city attitude, like, oh, it's so cute up here, and it's like, yeah, well, we do play pretty good hockey too. So I think maybe the current attitude stems from, well, we're not the little brother anymore. And, I don't know. That could be it.
Viggs, I just hate that everything's a home and home with them now. I wish the entire weekend up there.
Yep.
I heard rumors that might go back to 2 games at each building.
Bob Motzko said that. And the big thing is the fans, like Gopher fans want to go up to Duluth and spend a couple of days and see 2 games. And vice versa. Bulldog fans don't mind coming to the city for a couple games and going out to eat. Or
the only thing is that the Garden's gone now, Viggs.
I'll find a new home.
No more winning a jersey, shooting a puck or whatever it was back in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, the Molson Canadian girls had a shooting competition set up at the Garden, and I'm a pretty good shooter when I don't have to keep my feet moving. So I could just pick my spots and won a jersey that night. It was pretty fun. I donned it and danced around the Garden for a bit. So that was a good time.
we would always hear, the Gopher Rejects chant. That was a mainstay of Gopher fans and taunting the Bulldogs, saying they were Gopher Rejects. The better one, I always thought, the better taunt, the Maroon Loon, who was the UMD mascot for years and years, when he would come out on the ice, the Gopher fans would chant, "It's a chicken." I always just like that.
I love the Maroon Loon. I want that costume back on the ice.
They had Goldie out on the
Hanging
ice not that long ago up there. Like, I think one of the last Minnesota games at the deck, Goldie was out on the ice for some reason. I don't know.
Why not? Just come on out.
It's like the state high school tournament when you get the dueling mascots and cheerleaders,
I've always had fun up there. I love the old deck. The new place I thought would be a little better. It's so hard to move around. They've just got such pinch points in the corners.
The concourses are too narrow in the new building.
That part's bad. But
I do not miss the old deck. I miss absolutely nothing about the old deck.
I love how steep it was. Except the problem is when they're so steep and you're usually getting to the rink and you're pretty drunk by that time usually.
Lubricated, let's say.
Yeah.
Lubricated.
Yeah, and it's a little scary. Also, like, whoa, that's steep.
Yep.
I love that you could touch the ceiling tiles from the top row of the upper deck. I thought that was a nice touch of the old deck. And
Roseville got a picture of me just standing up there with my hand on the ceiling. Yeah.
Fun building. I think the new rink from a hockey watching once you're in your seat is great. And they had pretty good concessions, I feel like, at the deck. So,
yeah,
pluses and minuses.
I want to go up there for weekends. Viggs, you and I went up there on a kind of a road trip not too many years ago, and
heck of a whiskey tasting.
We did have a heck of a whiskey tasting weekend, but the thing, it was just it. We were heading back home.
First year since, I think it was 1962-63 season that the Gophers do not have the Bulldogs on the schedule in the regular season.
Can't fit them all in.
Nope.
Just like we can't fit them. That's what's happening with North Dakota. Next year they play, but then they guaranteed not going to play the year after unless they play, obviously, in the playoffs or something like that. So
I always say, that in 2013-14, Gophers weren't playing North Dakota for the first time in like 50 years. Everybody was up in arms. But then the hockey gods said, you know what? Let's give them one more game. And they played in that incredible Frozen Four game. So maybe the hockey gods will have a market correction. And if UMD ever gets its crap together this year, maybe they'll make the NCAA tournament.
Duluth has a long way to go right now to get in the journey. They're struggling this year.
They're not in a good place right now.
Okay, Jess. Will Granado make it through the season?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think he will make it past this season.
Yeah.
I'm just being brutally honest. I think he's done at the end of this season. But with football, when you have a staff of 10 coaches, it's easy to grab somebody and say, okay, you're going to coach the rest of the year. In hockey, you have a staff of 3. You generally clean house with of an entire staff when you make a hockey change. So I just don't see them bringing in 3 new coaches on an interim basis. I just think, Wisconsin has I don't even want to say underachieved because the expectations haven't been that high.
Well, Molesky was, I love watching Molesky on Facebook Live because, he'll take questions and he's really good after, doing his post game stuff. And I will get on there and say, hey, do you think he lasts the season? He goes, yeah, I think he lasts the season. And then a couple weeks later, I asked him kind of the same thing. He's like, now I'm not so sure. I'm not as positive. So, I mean, like I said, the first time they're 0-6 in a league in 54 years, I think he was saying.
Yep. Have they ever been 0-10? Because they play Michigan and Minnesota next in the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah, that's if they go 0 for the first half of the season for the Big Ten. That's going to be really.
Somebody in the chat maybe an hour ago said, do you think Mel would take over the Wisconsin program in the middle of the season? Would he? Absolutely he would.
Absolutely.
Will he? No, he no, he will not.
Any idea who the top candidates in college hockey right now would be for a job like that? Like if this was like college football where you had like a big board like going in.
You know,
would Grant Poltolny be a fit there?
I don't think so. The one I always wonder about is Nate Lehman at Providence. Another guy to keep your eye on, and he's in his first year in a new job, but Jared DeMichael, who's at Michigan State, who recruited a lot of that UMass team that won a national championship. Now he's at Michigan State, obviously doing good things with Adam Nightingale. So I think he's one of those hot young coaches that you're going to be hearing about. You know,
Yeah.
Brett Larson. There's a name.
Roll.
Guy who's done great things at St. Cloud, who's still pretty young. Sorry, Husky fans, but you know, if you wave a Big Ten job in front of him, he's going to take it.
Would Rolick take it?
I think he would. Absolutely.
I mean,
for a couple reasons.
The Gophers were looking for a job. Rolick was my top.
Yeah,
underdog.
Steve Rolick's been at Ohio State 10 years now. I think he's realizing, even though he won't admit it publicly, I think he knows he's not going to get a rink built there. They're investing everywhere else except their two hockey programs, one of which won a Big Ten title 3 years ago, which won a national title last year. It's absolutely egregious that Ohio State won't give more of an investment in hockey.
We had Caponigri on a couple weeks ago, and he threw his home school under the bus for that. Oh. He says it's just flat out embarrassing, the arena that the women's team plays in, a national championship team. And he's saying he says it's just flat out disgraceful.
I have to pause. I will be back in 2 minutes.
MRI results are back.
We'll take Jess off the stream for a second there.
He's got to inspect his biceps.
But, Cappy was right. I mean, Jess, he could probably give us more on it because he was there. He went and saw those games with Minnesota and Ohio State. And
it's amazing the budget that Ohio State has.
Rolick, whatever it is, I think it would be a great reason to say, you know what, I'm going Wisconsin. They will support me more there as a team, as an entity. Unlike he gets, yes, they got, we hear the shot is a great place. It's huge. They got great facilities underneath. It's really nice under all that stuff. But you still got to invest in the other things. And
but the shot's not a hockey rink either.
It's not.
It does an okay job as a hockey rink for the lower bowl.
It is nice underneath, and they do have all the stuff. I mean, all the work off. So, I mean, they've got all the other stuff. But man, they are in need of like a nice 5,000 seats.
If they had a Pagula, it would be a totally different situation there.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they don't. I think it speaks a little bit to Ohio as a state that they don't invest in hockey that way. And they think it's a cute little sport to have maybe or something. I don't know.
It's bad.
Yeah. And Kohl Center's not exactly a great fit, but it's kind of what they do. And I feel like they make it work better than Ohio State does with the shot. So
I found it fairly easy to get tickets, though. In the past, it wouldn't have been, I would have been getting tickets as soon as.
Oh, for Kohl Center?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's 19,000 seats.
All right. I see Jess back at the.
Did you get the MRI attached?
Oh, you're muted, Jess.
I'm sorry. What was your question, Biggs?
Bicep still attached?
Yeah. Bicep is still attached.
I love
this. I love this video look. This pale thing. I'm like the Obi-Wan Kenobi hologram here.
You kind of are.
Yeah.
When we do our Christmas special, you can be the ghost of Christmas past, and you can just be all gray.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic.
I can't believe the Rink Live doesn't set you up with like a ring light and the gear yet.
I'm not there yet. Another football helmet school. I was thinking about this. When are the Gophers going to go like mocking the football helmets, like maroon helmets with a little M on them? Notre Dame does it. Ohio State does it. Michigan does it.
By the way, Viggs, I don't like the oversized M's on the helmets they've been using for football recently.
Oh, those ones they wore last week were terrible. The whole uniform.
I like some of the uniforms stuff have been great. I love the chrome gold helmets. Those are
the chrome is pretty sweet.
That oversized M just looks really weird to me. But and like Viggs, you're always going to say it's all about the kids.
It's all about the kids. It's amazing that the Gophers haven't done something crazy for hockey, like a gray or a black jersey yet. It's coming. It's coming.
No.
Yeah, it's coming.
And
it'll happen someday.
Gray.
They'll do something unique at some point.
Since we're talking color uniforms, I made this comment today, and I don't mean to switch sports randomly, but the Packers, have you seen their color rush uniforms?
No, I haven't.
They're exactly the same as their road uniforms, but with white pants. Whoa!
It's like, rush of color.
Really? That's the best you could come up with in Green Bay? Come on.
Well, I really recommend they do not do something black, Viggs.
If the kids want it,
please
kids get it.
Please, both of you go to Slarks and say, if you ever have a black jersey, be prepared. You're going to get hammered.
I don't think Slarks is the one making this decision.
No, I know.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, I will.
Well, okay,
I will move from the press box if they come out there with those.
Think about this: Washington Commanders, only team in pro sports that wears maroon and gold. 2 weeks ago, when they played the Vikings, they did kind of a black and gold thing, military,
and it looked pretty good.
It looked okay. Looked a little bit too much like Grambling, I thought, but you could pull something like that off. Black jersey, gold stripes with then just like maroon accents or something like that.
Yeah, maroon accents, gold outline on.
And I'll tell you, with a gold helmet, it might look pretty cool. I don't know what you do. Do you go back to the old throwback gold pants then?
Yeah, but Viggs, they can't do another jersey for like how many years now?
Maybe things will change once those bigger Big Ten checks are coming in. But there is some Title IX stuff with their budget that makes it complicated. The men break a lot more sticks than the women do, so it makes the budget not very balanced.
Did you like the third jersey? I liked the jerseys last weekend.
Yeah, I thought they were good. They finally got to the U.S. from China.
I don't think they're ready.
It was the first game they could wear them. So they said, let's do it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That they hadn't worn a Saturday night gold or a second night of the series alternate, and then it's like they literally had arrived that day.
Yes,
really?
Yeah, they hadn't been there. They'd been on hold because of supply chain stuff. So that was literally the first game they could have worn them. Was that one? They finally had time to get all the names on and everything.
That's nice.
I like the Rubes idea, the skating goldie that the women wear sometimes. That's a fantastic look.
Have they put him on the shoulder before? I think has he been on the shoulder?
I don't think so, but the one where he's got his arms raised,
I think he
totally should be on the shoulder.
What was he? Wasn't there a skating goldie for 100th anniversary on the shoulder or something?
Might have been.
I can't remember.
I don't think.
Speaking of 100th anniversary, I looked it up. 99 years ago, Yost Ice Arena was built. It was Yost Fieldhouse at the time. 1923, they built that place. So,
really?
And if you go to Yost, the thing that strikes me, you guys are younger than me, but if you went to the old Mariucci, if you ever watched the Gophers play there, Yost makes me realize what they could have done with that shell if they wanted to keep playing hockey there. If they were dedicated to making that work as their hockey facility, and this is not a rip on 3M Arena at Mariucci, it's one of the great rinks in college hockey, but they could have done kind of something like what they did at Yost. Although Yost has more space, so you didn't have that one end where like the ceiling hung over the rink.
Yeah,
that goofiness from the old place.
Yeah, old Mariucci had such an amazing atmosphere with the ceiling and just like the field house feel to
big
it.
Windows
the
on the one end.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday afternoon game at the old Mariucci was really something. If you got Wisconsin in there, or if it was a fun opponent with the sun coming in the window and the smell of the popcorn and the Gopher Women's Hockey Club, which in 1985 was the most revolutionary idea I'd ever heard of. Women playing hockey? Come on! They always had a big urn set up, and they would sell Russian tea. That was their big thing. You could buy Russian tea to, something different to warm you up between periods.
I would have the Russian tea often. I think it was Country Time lemonade and like Country Time iced tea mixed together.
And then heat
by
it
the
up.
way, and then heat it up.
Yeah.
I think that's Russian tea.
All right.
But I remember like being in that standing room, where the ceiling came down, and you'd go out and you'd be standing with someone, and one person would go get ice cream, and you would hold your spot, and then they'd come back with the ice cream. It was great.
So yeah, the New Jerseys have skating goalie on it.
Speaking of the old building, there is a YouTube clip somewhere of an NCAA tournament game from about 1988.
Michigan State?
Against Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
With the Michigan State announcers up in like a box on the end behind the one net.
Wearing helmets.
Because there was no netting, and you were in play, let's just say.
It had been 6 years since I had been shooting in the box, and it's a little more nerve-wracking than I remember it being, because when I was in there most of the time before, 90% of the time, Mike Pigeon, cameraman, was right in front of me, a nice buffer.
Yep.
Now there is no buffer. And
it's called a blocker.
Puck came flying in against Notre Dame. A stick went flying over our heads, and Winslow right next to me is like, that just missed us. He's like, maybe you should wear a helmet back here. I'm like, I think I'm okay, but and I will tell anybody, it is completely different hockey experience when there's no glass in front of you. When you can feel the wind of the players going by, and it's just, for me, it's almost hard to even pay attention to all of what's going on, because I need to be concerned about basically a ring around that about 20 feet out, just anticipating, is anyone coming this way? And then obviously the things you hear, just too good. Too good. So, Jess, Deutsche was kind of chirping both Viggs and I this week.
Okay.
What was with the stick salute after a split last
After a split, yeah, that was controversial. Somebody brought that up, like the Battle Hymn of the Republic and the stick salute is supposed to be reserved for now. There are no rules. Do what you want. How long before we see the Gophers adopt like the Penn State style, where they go sing the school song to the student section after?
No,
probably can't do it, because that's where the visitors leave the ice, so they would probably create some traffic problems or something like that. But I do something about it. Maybe it was my first trip to Wisconsin, where they do varsity between periods, and everybody. That just, first time I heard that, I remember I got chills. And I'm not a Wisconsin fan, but it was just one of those neat, like, collective things that everybody does. And I'm just wondering if maybe we need something like that.
I'm wondering what it's like now, because I'm making my first trip as a fan to Madison in over 15 years this year, coming up in February. And when I was there last time, literally packed. It was packed. 14, 15,000. And then they do the singing, and the student section was amazing. It's not even close to that anymore, Jess. When you were there, even last year, it was pretty empty. And our guy, Todd Molesky, showing the puck drop, it's just getting uglier and uglier with the fans showing up.
Yep. Or not showing up, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Well, I've made this point before. Now, again, I'm old. I started watching college hockey.
Older than me. You're not that old.
I started watching college hockey as a student in 1987. So I've seen some stuff. Let's just put it that way. Wisconsin hockey, let's say 1989, to pick a year at random. They played at Dane County Coliseum. It had 6,800 seats, which was it had like 8,000 seats. Anyway, it was the biggest rink in college hockey at the time. You could not find a ticket to save your life. They sold out every game. Now, let's think about the state of Wisconsin sports in 1989. Badger football sucked and had for 20 years.
Yep.
Badger basketball sucked and had since the 40s. The Packers had sucked for 20 years. The Bucks were mediocre at best. The Brewers were mediocre at best. Marquette basketball had fallen off the map. Okay. The state of Wisconsin had one major sports team that won with any consistency, and that was Badger hockey. And everybody loves a winner. So Wisconsin had the most fans in college hockey, and I will say this, the least knowledgeable fans in college hockey, because they weren't hockey fans. They were just Badger fans who wanted to see somebody win something.
Yes.
I've told this story before, and it wasn't that long ago. It was at the Kohl Center. This happened, okay? They're playing Denver. I don't know why I was at the game. I think it was an NCAA tournament game. They're playing Denver at the Kohl Center, Wisconsin is. It's a big crowd. It's raucous. You kind of sit in the crowd there. The press box is kind of, you have fans sitting right in front of you. Delayed penalty coming up against Wisconsin. Denver's goalie sprints to the bench, and a guy standing in front of me stands up and yells, "Shoot the puck, the net's empty." Okay.
He's not lying, folks. I see people talking about chat. The last time I was there, like I said, 16 years ago, it was reminiscent of a high school game, Jess.
Yeah.
Where it could be 1-on-3 and they're coming up the ice and the fans in front of you. They go, "Ah!" I'm like going, have you seen a game before?
Yep.
And
now there are very knowledgeable hockey people in Wisconsin. I'm not saying
there are, but the bulk of the fans when I was there last.
But the thing I saw in the late 80s, early 90s, when Wisconsin was really good under Jeff Sauer, was a lot of fans who just wanted to see somebody win something.
Mm-hmm.
And no offense if you love female athletics, if you love women's basketball. No offense. Minnesota Lynx, same deal. My dad for a while was the world's biggest Minnesota Lynx fan. Why? Because they were a Minnesota team that was winning something.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the state of Wisconsin sports, and it's not that way. The Packers have been very good for the last 20 years. The Brewers are a solid contender. The Bucks have won a championship. Badger football is a Rose Bowl contender, not this year, but has been for the past 20 years. Badger basketball is going to Final Fours. It's pretty easy to forget about Badger hockey amid all that, especially when they're not great. And this year, they're not even good.
Oh, wow.
They won a Big Ten title. Nobody saw it because it was a COVID year, which.
Oh, that's true.
Which stinks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
You had media credentials.
Yep.
The rest of us couldn't get them.
You want to talk about that? What was it? 7-1 game? That was bad.
And the last time they played here, Minnesota didn't give up a goal, Viggs.
Yeah, that was a fun weekend for Gophers fans who wanted to get their team healthy on the point sheet. I felt bad for the Wisconsin goaltending crew. I know that their third string goalie got in there and is like, that's just not very kind to do that to him. It's not going to help.
Oh, yeah, 8-0, clinch a Big Ten championship. The last time.
I reminded Drew DeRitter of this last month when he was here with North Dakota and played very well in both games for North Dakota. His first game he started in college hockey was at Mariucci, and he got yanked after one period. I think the Gophers put up 4 on him in the first 20 minutes.
Did he say thank you for reminding me of that great memory?
No, he actually brought it up. He said the first place I ever got to start was here, and it didn't go well. I'm like, I remember that game. And it was funny. It was like 4-0 Gophers after one, or maybe 4-1, and they yanked him. They put in the veteran. I can't remember who it was. Played the veteran in the second period. And then at the end of 2, it was like 6-2 Minnesota. They actually put DeRitter back in just to say, you know what, it's not your fault. Get some more experience.
I remember like looking at the stats that the SID for the Gophers gives out every time. And it's like a lot of things like, last player to have a hat trick, last player to have 4 goals, last player to do whatever. And then there was like last player to miss a penalty shot. And it was Jack Ramsey for a long, long time. And now it's going to be Matthew Nyes. So Jack Ramsey is now off the stat sheet.
Remember that for next week, Viggs.
Yeah.
You got to remember that. We got Jack on next week.
Yeah, there should be a last time a goalie was pulled or, other embarrassing stats. It's like, why is that in there?
I wasn't on the show. I wasn't on the show that week, obviously. But how about the idea of we got awarded a penalty shot, but we're going to turn it down? And Matthew Nyes afterwards said he absolutely supported the idea. Like you're up 3-1, better to take 2 more minutes off the clock than, potentially have me not score. And then they get all the momentum and all that. It's like, yeah, I hadn't seen that before.
Made sense to me. It's kind of like a football coaching move. Like, oh yeah, I'll run down the clock.
Yeah, it definitely worked out. So puck on as Jared Moe put himself in the portal yet.
Mr. Hound, let me just remind folks, if Jack LaFontaine would have decided to go to pro hockey 6 months earlier, Jared Moe would be the Gophers goalie right now.
Yes, he would be.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would have no problem with that. I thought he was a good goalie. We didn't know what we had in Justin Close.
Well,
and now we know.
He might have been a good goalie, but Viggs, he did not have Motzko didn't treat him very well.
He did not. He did not put Jared in a position to succeed. I don't know if it was on purpose, to kind of clean house on things, but sometimes Bob and a player just don't see eye to eye. And that was the case with those two. And I don't even know if Jack would have left earlier, Mo would have probably had more runway, but maybe we would have seen Closer get starts in that situation too and emerge even sooner. Who knows? But
and in fairness, Mo had made the announcement that he was entering the portal before LaFontaine announced he would come back for a 5th year. So that I can only assume that was a conversation he had with his coach, who said,
they talked. He knew that Jack wasn't coming back. Jack hadn't announced. I'm guessing.
That's I tried to write a story. Well, not I tried to write. I did write a story about this last spring. But Grant Cruikshank announces he's going back in the transfer portal. He winds up at St. Cloud State. He's having a great year. God bless him. Great player. He's playing center, which is more of his natural position, and he's excelling at St. Cloud State. But when he announced he was going into the portal, there was a lot of Twitter chatter, a lot of people, chirping me saying, why don't players have any loyalty? Why, how can a guy just switch schools every year? And the thing I wrote was, not necessarily referencing his situation, but some of these guys are getting cut. Some of these guys aren't saying, you know what, I'm going to do what's best for me. I'm going to play for a different school every year, and Cruikshank made it clear that in his sit down with Bob Motzko at the end of the season, Motzko said, we'd love to have you back. We don't have any money for you. If you want to play here a 5th year, you're going to have to pay for it on your own. Because they have a budget just like everybody else of how much
the salary cap
they have. Yeah, there's a salary cap essentially. And Cruikshank said, that's fine. Now, I've heard that they made it clear when he first came here that, hey, we have money for you for 1 year. Anything beyond that, you're going to have to figure out, So this notion that Grant Cruikshank somehow didn't have any loyalty to any of his teams, no, that's not the case at all.
And boy, is he lighting it up.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him. It's curious it didn't work out in Minnesota. Like he had chances. He had, the right roles, the right line mates. It just never worked for him.
Thoughts on this, Viggs? Dan?
I mean, if I'm the Gophers, I would be trying to say Justin Close, Jackson Nelson, Matt Stoddicker, if you want to come back, we'll find a way. They've only got 4 recruits signed NLIs for next year. I think more than 4 players are going to be leaving the program with early departures and NHL signings. There's some questions there about what they're going to do. Gino Pashora, sure, he's still tied to the school, with his Twitter commitment and all that. I don't think that's a real thing right now. So
why is that? What's going on there?
he hasn't found a team. He's playing for Aberdeen in the NAHL right now, and he hasn't played a game yet.
Oh.
So goalies need to play games, especially if you're in the NAHL and you're thinking you're going to play at Minnesota. So I don't think that's a real thing for now. He hasn't made it official anywhere. But there are guys like Jimmy Clark who are committed that didn't sign this week, and he probably needs more time in the USHL. So we'll see.
They had brought Hampton Sekwinski in for a visit, and we're hopeful of getting him signed. He committed in Northern Michigan because that's where his brother's going, and he admitted, he's following his brother. He wants to play with his brother. So, kid out of Warroad led Warroad to the state championship game last year.
You know something about that city?
What's that?
You know
I've
something
been there.
about Warroad?
I've been there. I've been there. I've seen pictures. It's nice.
Yeah, it's a nice town.
Hockey Day, Minnesota, 2024. And if you're going up to Warroad for Hockey Day, Minnesota, I'll give you 2 words of advice: bundle up.
I am bored with Hockey Day.
Really? Doesn't do it for you anymore?
No, I
think it means a lot for the communities that have it.
It does.
It's big for the communities. It's less of a statewide thing, I think, anymore. Like outdoor hockey is a little bit passe, but I think for the communities that get to do it, it's huge. And so I'm glad that they're involving the MIAC this year. I think the only reason that's happening is because the White Bear association with the Johnny's coach is a thing. But
there are rumors, by the way, of a Gophers North Dakota game outdoors in Warroad as part of Hockey Day, Minnesota. I'm just rumors.
exhibition it'd have to be, wouldn't it?
I think it would have to be an exhibition.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Well, and in fact, Bob Motzko has said that because obviously his team has gotten approached before about playing some role in Hockey Day, Minnesota. And that's one thing he's made clear is it's got to be an exhibition. Because, if it's 48 below and they have to shorten the periods to 11 minutes to keep guys from getting frostbite, you can't have that counting in the standings. Mm-hmm. You can't have that counting for you or against you pairwise, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be cool.
It would be, but I'm not going up to Warwood for it.
Jess will probably be dropping the puck for that one. If they have it, right, Jess?
I will say, and granted, I last lived in Warroad in 1988. It is my hometown. I went to high school there. I was part of a state tournament team as the team statistician. Well, I'll admit it, but.
Oh, did my Jaguars take your team out? Oh, that's right. They
Nope.
89. Certainly it didn't.
I was in college then.
Sure doesn't count.
I don't count that. But having said that, I haven't lived there in a long time, but I still have many good friends there. I have close ties to the community. And for example, this summer, they retired TJ Oshie's number. Yeah. And they asked me to come up and be the MC for it. That was a huge honor for me. Likewise, when TJ Oshie brought the Stanley Cup to Warroad, he announced with like 10 days notice, I'm going to be in Warroad on this day with the Stanley Cup. Nobody knew anything about it until they saw it on TV with TJ Oshie saying, I'm bringing the cup this day. I got a call 10 minutes later from the people who organize things saying, would you come to Warroad that day and be the MC? And I said, literally, I would walk there to be the MC. I mean, what a huge honor. So my ties to that community are still very strong, and I'll always be a Warroad kid, and I will always say F you to Detroit if they claim to be Hockeytown USA, because they're not.
Yeah, we know. I love that.
Flying into Detroit tomorrow. Guess what hat I'm wearing?
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Does it say Hockeytown on it?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. All right. Yes. I want to see that on the gram.
Okay, we want to see a selfie in like the airport, wherever it says hockey.
Anywhere it says Detroit or Hockeytown and that hat. Let's see it.
Let's see that.
That's the content I want to crave. And
I've probably told you guys this joke before, but my friend Chris Lumpy Kvarnalov, which is just the greatest small town name ever, Chris Lumpy Kvarnalov, who runs the car dealership in town. There's one car dealership. It's a GM dealership. And it's right when you come into Warroad, that's the first business you see is the car dealership. I said, if you had any sense of humor, you would put up a big sign that says, welcome to Motor City. He won't do it, but come on.
Oh, he's got it. He should, though. All right, boys, I'm tired. Gonna have to call it in overtime.
We gotta nurse our injuries.
Yeah.
Upper
I gotta
bodies.
be on a plane in the morning. So.
Head.
Yeah. But so thanks, folks, for watching. Watch next week. Well, I will be drinking next week.
Are you gonna have a drink of the week at the start of the show? Is that what we're doing now?
Oh, I don't
show drink and then an overtime drink.
Well, I don't know if I could do that. I still have to kind of run the thing.
You do.
I mean, geez, that's asking a lot. We tried to get Shearhorn to be on with Ramsey last week, or next week, but Shearhorn just he's on vacation next week, so he couldn't make it.
Can't meet those appearance fees. Yeah.
Well, that too.
Limited budget here at Go for Puck Live podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Jess. I appreciate it.
Guys, always fun to talk hockey, and I'll see you in the press box before next month sometime. Because
yeah, after these next 6 games,
they're not home until after Pearl Harbor Day.
Thanks for watching, gang.